Hey everyone, welcome. We're so glad you could join us today. We're going to wait a couple minutes, I think, and just make sure that everybody that wants to get into this live event gets in. I'm Joey Terrell. You also see on your screen Joe Levine. We are in our studios right now. I'm in Los Angeles. Joe is in Colorado, and we are just ready to do a couple different things we would like to show you today. Joe, I know, is going to talk. We're both going to talk about light for sure. Joe's going to talk about modifiers that essentially make the light source bigger, and I'm going to talk about modifiers that go on the light itself. I mean, they both kind of go on the light itself, but we're going to cover two different areas of light and lighting, and kind of give you some options for in your own photography, things to make your photographs hopefully more interesting. So, I mean, for us, that's what we're always trying to do, is figure out a way to make our images a little bit more interesting through light. And the great thing about it is there's so many choices. But, you know, we thought we would show you a couple of options and then take what you can from them and, go make pictures. Joe, anything you want to say before we get started?
First off, welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us. And I just noticed in the chat window, Cameron, thank you for joining us from Scotland. That is absolutely thrilling. You guys will notice we have a chat window running, and please feel free, as you have questions throughout this morning or today, post your questions in there. Some, I might feed to Joey, Joey might feed back to me, but our plan is to leave, some time at the end, 10, 15 minutes to go back through the chat, see if there's any questions in there. And again, we may answer them some earlier on. We may wait a couple minutes. The plan today, as Joey mentioned, is, I'm going to talk about some of the stuff you see here and why. And then Joey's actually going to talk about smaller lights, but also doing a demo, a complete setup with a set, a camera. It's going to be great. So again, thank you for joining us. And I think with that, we could probably go ahead and dive right in. What do you think, Joey?
Go right ahead, Joe. I'm all set to go.
All right, I'm going to switch some cameras here and move things around. So, all right, now a little bigger on the screen. We're changing our platform a little. So a few of you have joined us in the past. We're switching it up for video quality. What I really wanted to talk about first is, well, why we have all this. If you look around it, and I will talk about why I have my living room lamp sitting here. It's not just for, ambiance. There is a reason. It's my friend. It is up on an Apple box to raise it up a little bit also. But, as photographers, we have a plethora of different lights and options available to us in all different sizes. If you look over this shoulder, and I'll walk back there in a minute, I have a tiny little softbox. And over there, I have a bigger one. And I have some that are 4x6. And in fact, I'm being lit by a scrim that's 6 feet by 6 feet. And one of the questions that I know Joey asked me earlier is, why do I have a little, blue toy sitting here? It's a dog toy, which is, actually common in my house. And if my dog hears me playing with it, you might see her come running in a second. So don't be surprised if that happens. But there's a huge principle in lighting, and it relates to all of this. It's that for hard versus soft light, that the size of the light source relative to the subject is what makes it hard or soft. We could look at, this softbox over here, and it's, or octabox, it's 3 feet, 5 feet. We have a variety of different things. One of the great analogies, and I got two of them for you with this, is first the sun. We think of the sun as this giant big fireball in the sky, but it's really far away. So relative to a person or a subject, it's a hard light source. Then you get the cloud cover. Well, that acts like a diffuser or a softbox. Now it's it's a large surface, so it's a softer light source. And that's where this guy comes in, because this is the one you don't have to be a photographer to really understand. So this light right here, we all have bulbs like this. It's a small light source, and I just looked at it, so now I can't see the camera very well. But it's a hard, small light source. So the lighting on me right now, if I get down here or up here, it's really hard on my face. And as we talk about modifiers that go on lights, well, we all have these. And all I'm doing is modifying this light source, putting a little modifier on it, and I've made it quite a bit larger. I've warmed it up a little bit also. So real quick analogy, same light, hard light source, and get that back on there. And now we have a soft light source. So it's a real quick analogy when it comes to lighting, that just how this works. It's one of the easiest ways I know how to explain it. I'll just move that there a little bit. So I'm going to take a step. Yep. Yeah, it is the exact same principle. And there's a reason why I'm being lit by a 6 foot by 6 foot scrim. It's soft, it hides my age lines and all that. So we like that larger source for those things. I'm going to back up a little bit. So I'm going to switch and just kind of walk through what I have sitting here. And I'll bring my little dog toy with me here. So if this is our subject and I come over to this 3 foot by 3 foot, and I will move the lamp just to get it out of the way. It's making a little extra noise there. You know, if this little toy is sitting right here, well, the size of the source, the light, is really large compared to the dog toy, so it's a soft source. However, if this dog toy comes all the way up here towards the camera, I kind of lost, wrong camera. There we go. Lost the camera for a second. This becomes a harder source. So as a photographer, we have to think about, do I want a hard source or soft source, and how far away the light is. You know, you would think, okay, soft and softer. Well, that's true if the distance is the exact same. But if on this one, this ball starts moving this direction and it's relatively the same size if it's here, well, the quality of light would be just about the exact same. So it's really how we use the light and where we place it. So again, a 3-foot octabox, a 4-foot or 5-foot, there's a 4 on a shelf over there. It's what do I need from the light? I might want that certain quality, and I might want a little bit harder light, or I might want a softer one, but it all really depends on where the subject is. Which then brings us to this beast back here. This is an extra large silver umbrella. Same concept, the size of the source is pretty big, and here I have a small umbrella. Obviously, this would seem to be a softer source. This one would be a little bit harder source, again, if the subject's in the same spot. However, as the subject moves closer or farther, I could turn this into a hard source. I could turn this into a soft source. It just really depends on the placement of that. Now, one of the things we notice right off the bat, this one is silver. The one I almost knocked over is white. And we think, well, is one harder, one softer? Well, when we're talking about silver versus white, what we have to realize is it's really about the size. This was explained to me years ago, and I just love the way it was put to me, that when it's silver, it's not that it's really a harder source. It has a little bit more inherent content. It's a little crispier. And I love that phrase, crispy, because if you look at the shadows are pretty much identical if I had 2 extra large white and silver, but there's some inherent contrast without it changing the shadow, the harder, soft shadow with it. And the shadow is a really important mention because I've always found the easiest way to look at a light source is and understand it. If we look at the shadow, you know, I could have a ball sitting here, and I know Joey's going to do this. I have a light coming across. I learned so much more from the shadow. Is the shadow long? Is it hard edge? Is it defined? I can learn about a light source without ever looking at the light. In fact, if you walk outside any given day, just keep your head down, you could look at your feet and look at the shadow that's being cast and go, okay, I know where the sun is placed. Is it bright blue sky with a hard source? Is it a cloud cover day? We have a pretty good variety with that. Okay, I'm going to back up here again. And we can actually see there's a tiny little softbox. So again, that's like a 1 by 1.3, a 3 by 4, and I have a 4 by 6. And I can turn any one of those into a hard light or soft light depending on the placement and the relative size of the subject and where everything is. So that's really why photographers have such a good variety of different things. But here's also one of my, I would say, good friends. It's a 1 by 3 strip, and they make 1 by 2s, 1 by 3s, 1 by 4s, 1 by 6. So if we're talking about, well, relative to the subject, and you'll hear that over and over, relative to the subject, if let's say 5 feet is soft, and we're saying 1 foot's a little harder, what's happening here? Because it's 1 by 3. And this is where strip lights are so fun and so unique, in my opinion. Because not only is it about the distance to the subject and how that relative part, on this axis, it's hard because it's only a 1 by or harder. On this axis, it's 3 feet. So again, if I bring my little toy over here, or my dog's toy, I should say, and I have it sitting here, the light going up and down is soft. The light going across actually becomes a little bit harder. So when you have a strip light and you can rotate it a little bit, you can really change the quality of light, the highlights, the shadows, just the overall look real easily. Most of the time when you see a strip light, you see them in an advertisement, someone's lighting, let's say a wine bottle, or a glass. They're really beautiful contours. Well, that's great, but it works really well on people also, because I can decide to have a hard edge across my face and soft going the other way, or vice versa. So really great light to work with. Another thing to remember is that, all these modifiers, they're going on lights. There's a light behind a strobe. Actually, these are all strobes behind every one of these. But kind of an interesting part here is that even modifiers that go on lights sometimes have their own modifiers. So I know some people already use these, and I know Joey and I are both big fans of them. I can simply just Velcro on another modifier. So this is what's called a soft grid. And with the soft grid, what's nice about it, it's not making the source any harder or softer. All it's doing is taking the light and stopping it from flaring out. It's kind of directing the beam. But again, the size of it from top to bottom and side to side hasn't changed. So we have so much control nowadays as photographers to do that. I just saw a note that someone was breaking up. Oh, there we go.
Hey, Joe, I think what it was is while it was just you on screen, they weren't able to hear me, but I'm pretty sure they can hear me now.
Oh, okay, great. So as we look around and we look at light sources, I'm going to bring my trusty friend back in here. And actually, I would challenge everyone to do this, is periodically just work with modifying lights that you have in your house. Try different things with that. Don't get caught up in, I saw a picture that was created with this modifier, or the advertisement said this modifier. For me personally, I've used, and generally you'll see octoboxes using with people or photographing people. I have photographed an apple with a 5-foot octobox. I have photographed a single apple with a 4x6 softbox. It's all about the quality of light I'm looking for, the style, the mood I want to create. That's how it all works for me. So Joey, I'm going to pass it back to you unless there's any questions I can answer now.
Thank you, Joe. No, I thought that was really great. And the one thing that I would add to the whole different sizes of soft boxes and grids and things like that. What's amazing to me is that the grids themselves end up costing more than the soft boxes. One of the reasons, I mean, people are always shocked when they look at the pricing for these things, and it's what it is there's one single company that holds the patent to it, and they license it to other companies. At least that's how it used to be. I'm pretty sure that's still in effect. And so, you can be shocked when you go shopping for this stuff. The other piece about that is just simply that there's really no other way to get the effect of a soft grid on a soft box. Meaning, like, I'll give you a perfect example. Sometimes I'll be making a portrait and I'll be in a room where, let's say the wall is green or it's pink or something like that. And I just want to light the subject, but I don't want any light to spill and hit that pink wall or that green wall and then reflect off the wall back into the subject. Because if that were to be the case, you would see this pink or green kind of quality in the skin tone from the light just spilling, bouncing off and going onto the person's face. The great thing about a soft grid is that what it allows you to do is all the light goes in one direction. It doesn't spill off to the side, but you don't change the quality of the softbox. So you get the best of both worlds. You get lots of control, and you also get that great quality out of the softbox. So because of it, they're able to charge an obscene amount of money, what seems like an obscene amount of money, but they're very much worth it. They're great control devices. So with that, it doesn't look like there's any other questions. So I'm going to move on to what's going on in here. Let me take you on a little. I've got a camera set up and another camera. I have these are some of my favorite subjects. I have an antique camera collection. I love photographing them in different ways, and they make for really interesting subjects just simply because of all the details and the history that's inherent in the camera. But I've got this set up holding the camera. I've got the camera sitting up here on this platform. And then if we go in camera, you can see that that's what it looks like in camera. The light is not very good, but we're going to fix that. We have an overhead view here so that you can kind of get a sense of what the set looks like. And starting in the back, I've just got like a white piece of foam core sitting there. This right here is a piece of plexiglass. I have two Apple boxes supporting it. Underneath it down here, which you can't really see, but I'll pull it back so that you can, there is a 12 by 12 LED panel, and that's kind of just doing some light from underneath, lighting this plexiglass panel. And then if we go to this camera, you can kind of see it from there. It's the same, obviously it's the same setup, but you get a better sense. This is the front of the lens right here. Down here where my hand is, right there, is the LED panel. You can see the Apple boxes here. This is the plexiglass, and our background is back there. Now, the reason that I have it set up this way is I want to show you a couple of things. One, I want to show you what happens when you modify the light at the source itself. But I also want to show you that it's very simple, even if you don't have soft boxes or anything else, that there are ways to modify the light. So let me start with modifying the light on our subject here. So right now, all I've got is it's an LED lamp, and it's just kind of hidden back here behind this. Maybe you can see it from that angle. Here it is here. And you can see by putting my hand in front of it, I'm casting that shadow. And it's aimed directly at my camera here. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to take this another piece of plexiglass. This is just, I'll go back to this. This is just 12 inches by 12 inches. And I got it at a local supplier. It's not more than $5. But it's a perfect modifier, frankly, because what I can do is just put like an A-clamp on it, like so. And I can just set it right on the surface of the table. And if I go back to in camera, notice how much more pleasant that looks. So I'm going to take it out, and then I'm going to drop it back in. Everything changes. Look at the front element of the lens. Look at the reflection off the leather that's on the camera, and also the shiny bits on the front of the lens. Everything becomes much more smooth and much more even. Now, what I've done, and I'm going to go to the overhead camera so you can see it. This is literally touching the lens hood. It's that close. So I've got it almost as close as it can be. There you can see if I go back to in camera, just on the back end, you can see there's the A-clamp. So I'm going to just take it out of frame. That, by doing that, kind of to what Joe was talking about earlier about the size of the source relative to the subject, by having it right on top of the camera, that's the softest light I can get with this size, a 12 by 12 modifier. Now, if I pull it away, the light's going to change. And if we go back into camera, as I pull it away and move it in closer, it gets, you see what happens like right in the lens itself. Things don't look as nice until I get it right on top of it. So now that I've done that, let's talk about, yeah. Up
here, real close in size to that small softbox I have in the background. What would be pros and cons versus, let's say, that piece of plexiglass, or switching out different size modifiers for that difference that you were showing in close or pulled back a little bit?
Well, people often ask, and I think I'm going to answer what you're asking, Joe. People often ask, like, well, if you have say a 3-foot softbox, why do you need a 4-foot or a 5-foot or a 7-foot? And the reason is simply that sometimes you need the distance. So you need to be able to pull back and not have your light in the shot. So like, let's say, for example, you're shooting a head to toe portrait of someone, and you need to have really soft light. If you took a softbox this big and you were only shooting the head, you could move the softbox right next to him and you would be out of frame. You wouldn't be able to see it. But if you're shooting full size, a 6-foot man, for example, to get the same quality of light, you have to pull the light source back, right? Because otherwise it'll be in the shot. But at the same time, it needs to be bigger. Why? Because you pulled it back and made it smaller. And so essentially what you're able to do with different size sources is you can get different qualities of light at different distances. In this case, because there's this part of the shot, or this where the plexiglass is sitting is not in the frame, I can get it that close. But if I say took the camera and pulled it back here, now all of a sudden I have to move this back further, and it's going to change the quality of light. How could I solve that? Get a bigger piece of plexiglass and I would have the same quality of light. Why? Because even though I moved it back, I made it bigger relative to the source, kind of like what Joe was demonstrating with the dog toy.
Yeah, and I'm just going to add, obviously we're in a controlled studio right now, both of us. When you're outside shooting, let's say a portrait or something else outside, where you place the light, sometimes you don't have as much control. So having the larger, let's say, softbox definitely allows you to move it back a little bit and still keep that soft light because it's relative to the subject. So we have a little bit more control in the studios, but when we go outside, we definitely give some of that up. And that's why the variety is really important and nice to have.
Yeah, absolutely true. So let me talk a little bit about some pieces of gear. This stuff's heavy. So these are two different kinds of light heads. And I think it's important to draw a distinction between the two of them. These are both strobes. This is a Profoto B1X, and this is a older, they don't even make this anymore. This is a acute head, and I'll turn it sideways so you can see it. I helpfully have the name on the side. This is so, and I have it with all of my stuff. It's on purpose. This one's head 3, and this one is whatever it says. The reason for that, just in case you're wondering, is so I can look around the studio and I can see if I'm going to make an adjustment to one of the lights, I know which one I need to adjust. And so at the connection, for this head, at the connection at the pack, it will also say whatever that says, head 2 or acute 2. So I know that's the one that I want to adjust. So pay no attention to the rest of it. But what I wanted to point out more than anything was the fronts on these. So this one has a flat front, you can see. This one protrudes, and these are great inside of a softbox, at least in my opinion. The reason is in this case, all the light goes one direction forward. In this case, it goes forward, but it also goes to the sides, which means the light fills the softbox more evenly than something like this. Now, that's also true of an umbrella. So an umbrella, a softbox, even like a handheld reflector that you want to put in front of a light, even something like a piece of plexiglass, you're going to get more beam spread from this. The other thing you'll see, as I put this reflector on, as I move it in and out, you can see that it's seeing inside the reflector, it's seeing that head. What that means in English is that as I move this is zooming. So I'm controlling the beam of light. I'm making it wider and narrower. If I do the same on here, that does not happen. The reason is it looks like it is, but all you're seeing is the black on the side of the head. But there's no, as I go, at the end of it, it doesn't change the way it does here. And the reason for that is because of that protruding flash head, you have the ability to zoom and control the light. Now, these kinds of heads are very common now, and these kinds of heads are becoming increasingly uncommon. These are great for travel, and I mean, you just take something and you put a cover on it and away you go, and you throw a couple of these in a backpack, and they're terrific. These are really great in the studio, but you can turn this kind of into this, and what there is there's a cover that goes on the end of it to make it, it protrude like this. So you can get that nice spread inside of a softbox. So I really just wanted to show you the difference between the two. Some of the modifiers you can use for, these use grids, which are these. These grids go on like so, and they essentially narrow down the beam of light. And let me show you what that looks like. I'm going to get rid of this one because we don't need it for now.
And while Joey's making a quick changeover with the lights, on those two different heads, the B1X with that flat front, sitting behind that piece of glass is a reflector built in. It's roughly 75 degrees, give or take a few degrees, but you can't move it. It is kind of what it is. When you add the dome on the front, it's still 70 some odd degrees going into that small dome. The Acute 2 that he had, which is unfortunately a little bit of an older style because they can get damaged and people have broken them because they're harder to cover. That reflector, went in and out. It's a zoom reflector, and that kind of a head just gives you, with one modifier, a lot of different looks from a beam that is narrow to quite a bit wider, where the B1X is, well, it's mid-70s, and you can't really change it.
Maybe a little bit bright. I don't think we're going to be able to see it, unfortunately. It's really just too bright. Maybe we can see it down here. We'll try. Trying to get the balance of the light such that you guys can see it. Let's see if I can do it. I'm going to go to... see a little flicker. I'm sure you guys see that too. Well, I'll show you. Here's a good way to see it. I'll aim this right at you, which seems crazy, but you'll be able to see the difference. So one of the reasons this is, what's that? No, I promise. One of the things that you can see here is like there's the whole light source, and that by putting on the grid, it narrows it down. If I go to something even narrower when I remove this, you see even less of it. And so I'm going to aim it right almost at you. So the way I always think of it, and as photographers, we say this to people all the time, like if you're ever doing a group photo of someone, And, you know, there's like front row, middle row, back row, and there's always somebody in the back row who's trying to hide from the camera. And I always say, you know, if you can't see me, I can't see you, which is, it sounds obvious, but it's a good way, you know, like, look, if you want to be in the picture, you have to move in such a way. Like if I'm like this, you can't see me, and I realize it because I can't see the camera. But the minute I come up, I can see the camera. I know I need to position myself between two other people. It's the same when you're looking at grids and lights. So right now, I'm not aiming it right at you, but you guys can see when I remove that and I put on a wider grid, this is a 20-degree grid, right? You can see that you can see a lot more of the light. When I go to a narrower grid, you see much less of it just by tipping it down. And so all a grid really does is narrow the beam. You go from light going everywhere to light going here, to light going here, to light going here. And so it's a great way on the source itself to be able to control things. So I'm going to get rid of this. Let me just look over at the chat, see if there are any questions about that. We'll definitely talk about it at the end. So let me go back to my little set here. Again, in camera, which is just coming up now, what I've got going is simply 3 lights. And I'm just going to let you look at this for a second as I describe the light. So underneath the plexiglass is an LED panel. That's providing this light here. Then I've got another light head that's got barn doors on them. And these barn doors, as you can see as I rotate them, if you look in the panel that's right in front of the camera, this one right here, as I turn the barn doors, you can see the shape of the light changing. And what I'm trying to do with the barn doors is make sure the light only hits the panel. I only want it to hit this panel. And you can see there's a square in the middle of it. So like as I rotate the head a little bit, see how it spills onto the background? As I rotate and put it just on the panel, that means I only have the light going through the panel and nowhere else. And that's what I want. And then I've got a third light that's on the background back here, also with a set of barn doors. And by rotating these barn doors, you can see I can change the angle of that light. And so if I go back in camera, you can see I can put that beam of light, I mean, obviously it doesn't make any sense up there, but by doing it this way, it kind of draws the viewer's eye to the camera. And then I can adjust the brightness of each one of these. Like I can bring up the camera a little bit if I think it's not bright enough. And if I wanted to knock down that background a little bit, because I think I'm drawing too much attention to it, I can knock it down, or I can bring it up brighter. And I'm doing this with really just 3 light sources. Again, just the light here, the light here, and the light there. And the only thing that I'm modifying really is 2 barn doors on the light sources themselves and this piece of plexiglass. And we have what is essentially, at least, you know, I think it's kind of an interesting kind of picture. Now, let me talk about a couple other ways that you can modify light at the source. We talked about the grids. We talked about barn doors, and barn doors are, you know, hopefully you can see them. I'll take this one off so that you can get a good look at it. It looks like this. They're essentially like these little wings that just go in, and then there's 4 of them. And you can narrow the beam down to almost nothing. And so again, by putting them in front of the light and then shaping it, we'll go back to this. You can see, like there, it's spilling all over the place and ruining the shot. But by knocking it down, there you can see the square. We go back in camera, and then we just sort of rotate this for the background. Make sure that we have it aligned the way we want. It looks like it's a little, there we go, that's a little better. And so much of what light is, at least to me, is about the subtleties. Is it a little too bright? Is it a little too dark? Is the balance going well? So that's what I'm looking for with light. Now, I said I was going to talk a little bit more about modifiers. The one thing that I end up using a lot, and it's really beneficial particularly on continuous LEDs, and to be honest with you, I have shifted. I used to use strobe a ton. I still do, but I use LEDs a lot more. And the reason the reason for that is I can see the light. When you use a strobe, one of the shortcomings of it is that you're not really seeing what the strobe is going to give you until you actually fire it. You're just looking at an approximation from the modeling light. The modeling light gives you that, that kind of, here's where it's approximately going to fall, but it doesn't give you any idea of how bright it's going to be, how it's going to balance with any other lights you've got going. One of the great things about continuous light, whether it's LED or any other kind of continuous light, is that you actually, what you see is what you get. What you're seeing through the camera is what the camera is going to capture. In fact, it's a little unnerving now with, I've completely switched to mirrorless cameras. And so when I go to take a picture, nothing really changes. Essentially, like I'm looking at the back of the LCD right now, essentially what I see there when I take a picture is exactly what ends up being there. Like if we go in camera, I mean, that's live. You can see my hand in front of the camera, right? But when I go and I take a picture, nothing really changed. I mean, that's the shot. And it was the same when I'm pressing the shutter release button there so that you can see that's live and that's the picture, and they don't change. And so the point is when you're working with continuous LED, that's just a common thing. Like I look at it, I look through the camera and I go, perfect, and I just make the capture. When you're using strobe, you have to get it close, and then you dial this and dial that, which is fine because strobe has a million advantages as well. But LED is to me, it's very compelling because, like I say, what you see is what you get. So last thing I wanted to mention was this. This is really fun. This is what's called a spot projector. And essentially what it is it's a series of lenses, and you drop it onto the front of a LED. And so let me go out here and I'll show you how this works. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to remove the barn doors. And now you see lights going everywhere. And I'm going to drop in this projector. And you can see essentially what I'm getting is maybe you can see that. Yeah, you can see it. It's a spot now, which can be focused, which I'll try to do. I can make it bigger or smaller. I can make it sharper. So there it's smaller, and then I can change the shape. Like I say, make it really sharp if I want to. But the other thing you can do is you can put patterns in it. And so I just put in here like what's called a breakup pattern. And it's the kind of thing where, like right now, you can see it's clearly sharply focused, but I can make it by adjusting the lenses kind of like a out of focus breakup kind of a thing. So if I go back and I take you back in camera, it looks kind of like that. And so if I play with it a little bit and try and make the source really big, I'll see if I can make it as big as I possibly can. It sort of makes for this random, out of focus, kind of something's going on back there, but we're not really sure what, and it just sort of adds interest to the shot. And all of that's done right at the head itself. And so I'll leave you with, light is one of those things for us, for both Joe and I, that is absolutely one of the greatest tools you can use in photography. And it doesn't matter what kind of photography you do, whether it's pictures of people, pictures of things, macro photography. light is really where you can really show off what you can do. I always think of, I always draw the analogy to like a painter. They have a palette of colors, and you would never want to paint. I've used this analogy a million times, so if you've heard it before, forgive me. But I think it's just so appropriate. If you were to paint a picture and the only color you had was red, your paintings would get boring pretty quickly. But if you have red, blue, and green, you can mix the colors and do a lot of different things. If your palette has dozens and dozens of colors, you have endless combinations. And I always think about the tools we have in photography as very similar to that, in that cameras are one color based on what they can do. Lenses are really important. There's several colors, but then you get into light and different ways you can use light. And when you combine them all, you end up, it's very much like a painter in that you can do anything. Different bristle tips, different sizes of brushes, different colors, all of it, and the different ways that you blend it all. And so, for us, light is a really big deal. And I know Joe will mention this as well. We're going to do another one of these that's going to be very much about light again in a couple weeks. And, if you're interested, we'd love to have you back. But for today, we just wanted to, go over these things and hopefully, interest you in some things that maybe you haven't tried before. And with that, let me toss it back to Joe.
So thanks, Joey. Great information as always. One of the things Joey was demonstrating was changing the modifiers on the light, whether it's barn doors or different grids. And I meant to mention this earlier, when I was talking about all the different softboxes, because I was primarily talking about the relative to the size. And you'll notice we have a front scrim on all of these. And a softbox this size actually has generally an internal scrim. There's one on the inside that the light hits it, spreads it out a little bit, then hits the second scrim and spreads it out even more, but still going one direction. So it's not changing the size. And you'll notice this one is silver on the inside. Some are actually white. But you don't have to use the softbox or your modifiers that way. You'll notice the way I had this one set up, when I remove the front panel, I don't have the one on the inside. It actually changes the light quality a little bit. It gets a little bit crispier. Now, I also don't have to shoot even with this scrim on it. I could just open it up and take that scrim all the way off. And then I have this larger source that, well, a little different than this one, because the big softbox, the light's going into it and coming out. On this style of shooting, the light is still going straight out. We have that 75-degree reflector in there, but now I also have a 5-foot reflector acting to spread light even further. When Joey was talking about all the different grids, I'm going to guess you had a 5 and a 10 and a 20 that were sitting there. I'm not sure. He's kind of chuckling.
That's exactly right. I had a 5, a 10, and a 20. In the bigger reflectors, sometimes I'll go as high as a 40. But on the B1X and the D2s, I use 5, 10, and I use the 5 a lot. You wouldn't think so, but the 5 is an amazing amount of control.
And as I back up and looking at the softbox, I know this grid on this one is actually a 30-degree grid. So again, it's not changing the size of it, it's just controlling it. And I'm almost surprised we didn't say that word 40 or 50 times in the past 45 minutes, because pretty much everything we're doing, whether we're aiming a light, we're rotating the beam, putting a grid on it, one, we're changing the quality, as we talked about here, but it's all about control. It's about getting the vision you want out of your shots, because as Joey said, our palette that we have now is, well, it's actually unlimited. So any vision you have in your head, you could definitely create. With that, Joey, we had some great questions come in. So I'm going to go backwards in them a little bit. One of them was, Nancy asked, with LEDs, do you ever get any banding?
I think there are some cases with LED where you would get banding. One of the things that, and it's a tough conversation, I'll be really honest with you. There is some, I noticed one of the other questions was, do brands really matter anymore? And that's gonna that and this question actually go hand in hand. It's not so much the brands that matter as it relates to light or LED. It's really more the quality of them. So if and you can see this, frankly, if you just buy a light bulb for your house. If you go to your local home store and you buy an LED bulb, if you buy an inexpensive one, you'll notice that the color quality isn't all that good. It kind of reminds you a little bit of a fluorescent light in that, without going into a real technical discussion, there's something called CRI, which stands for Color Rendition Index. And what it means is, what's the spectrum of the light itself? Meaning, if you project that light onto something, how much color can you actually see? Now, with the sunlight, you see 100%. With incandescent light, you see nearly 100%. With lousy, cool white fluorescent, you see about 70%. And the first question I get when I mention this to people is they say, well, can't you just fix that in Lightroom or Photoshop? And the answer is no, because the color wasn't there in the first place, and you can't make it, appear out of nowhere. And the reason is because the light spectrum won't allow you to see the colors that are actually there. So the solution to that is as it relates to photography, is purchasing quality gear as it relates to lighting. And this is true whether you're talking about speed lights, talking about LEDs. It's true of everything. The quality of the light meaning the quality of the light itself is going to determine how good things look in your photographs. I mean, if you're shooting pictures of people and you want to get excellent skin tone, you have to start with light itself that is also high quality. It's the only way to get it. And so, to answer your question, there are LEDs made that do things like flicker. They create odd artifacts in digital files. When you get into quality stuff, these are really good quality, and the way that you know this is if people use them for motion pictures, they have to be good quality. And the reason is that if they flicker for motion pictures, they're going to be bad for you as well. And so if you get quality photographic LEDs, you won't have any regrets, and the color will look beautiful. Hopefully that answers the question.
And we run into a similar thing with strobes. People think a lot of times, whether it's an LED or a strobe, that light is light. And Joe and I would both disagree with that. It's light is light in the sense of exposure. If you're just going for a good exposure, light is light. Gosh, it's probably been just a couple of years ago. I think it was the article came out in like Petapixel or one of those other sources. They had taken a handful of strobe manufacturers, and similar lights to what Joey had with the B1X are all mono lights, which is everything sitting in here. And they took the light and they aimed it down a wall. So a whole bunch of different brands. And what it was is so obviously right near the head was bright white. And in the distance, it faded off and got much darker, which was exactly what you would expect. It grayed out. What they were looking for is, what is the consistency with the color of the light through the spectrum? Not in a sense, is it warm versus cool, but is it neutral throughout? And a couple of the brands, when they read the color temperature of light going all the way down the white wall, they found it didn't change. So from white to light gray to middle gray to dark gray to black, it was neutral. RGB values were neutral all the way across. And then they tested a lot of brands. The brands that they found were a little bit lower priced, a little bit lower quality. It might have started out white, but then there might have been a little green cast, and then it moved into a magenta cast, and then maybe a blue cast, and went back. So the color kind of went in and out a little bit. And to Joey's point, you can't correct for that. It's impossible, because you can't neutralize it, because if you neutralize the magenta, well, then we're going to get another cast. If we neutralize for the green, we get magenta. If you neutralize for a red, we have the cyan. So the quality really does matter. And in portraits, you could just imagine what happens is we notice a little bit of a color shift, let's say a highlight on a face to a shadow. It's a really small area. So that is where the quality of the gear matters. It will save you hours in post-production trying to fix that. And I hate to say it, sometimes price does matter, not always, but when it comes to lighting, sometimes it does with that. Another question that came in is someone, I think it was someone had asked, do you ever use colored plexiglass? Joey, I think that was asked when you brought your plexiglass out.
I haven't ever used colored plexiglass. It certainly has potential. What I prefer to do instead is use a gel behind the plexiglass. So for example, I've got this whole case that I use that are, hopefully you can see all this, they're all full of different colored gels in here. And so if I were to pull out, say, here's a really bright pink one and a blue one as well, I could just take this, let's see if we go, let's go in, we can go in camera and probably see it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this pink gel and I'm just going to lay it over, actually here's a better view. So I can color the plexiglass any color I want. There it is in pink. And here's some blue. And so simply by, in fact, if I turn off that light, you'll even see it even better. The idea is I would prefer to just simply buy a white piece of plexiglass and then make it whatever color I want. It makes it easier for me. I don't have to own as much stuff. I already own too much stuff as it is. But yeah, you have complete control. A nice soft white and some gels, and you can get whatever you want. I did see another question.
I'm just going to add, like, kits and kits of gels that you can use. And what I actually just do is clothespins. If I want a gel, a light this size, obviously I'm not going to put a big gel on it. I just use clothespins right on the inside here on the rods. And I just clip one of these on and all of a sudden I have a warm light, a cool light. Because people talk about, well, can't you just neutralize or change the white balance in post-production? But in post-production, it's in the entire scene. So I could warm a scene, cool a scene, add a tint to it, but that's all the lighting. When you're using the gels, you have the ability to say, I want that one a little warmer, that one be a little cooler, maybe a little magenta. And that's where gels come in. And I would bet some of these gels I've had for 25 years in here or longer. So they last forever.
I did want to answer, Jake had a question about, he said, are there any super cool, unique modifiers that are brand specific? Yes, for sure. But I can think of none more brand specific and more cool than probably a bunch of you have heard of a brand called MagMod. I'm a huge fan of their products. Essentially, if you've never seen them, the way they work is if you're using speed lights, and I use speed lights a fair amount, what they allow me to do is get the control out of a speed light that I can normally get out of a big studio light. And so the way that they work, if you've never seen it, is the reason the company is called MagMod is they use magnets, and it's got something like this, which goes on the end of your speed light, and it's like an elastic band. So you have to do your exercises so that you can keep your muscles strong to get them on. But once they're in place, it looks like this. It reminds me of like a couple little ears or something. It's like, it looks like Yoda or something. And so then everything is magnetized. And so if you want to add a filter, here's a filter holder. And with the magnet, it just sticks on the end of it. If you want to add a grid, you take the grid and you just stick it to the end of it and it stays. If you want to add a snoot, it just sticks to the end of it. And you can collapse the snoot so that if you want a wider snoot angle, you can have a wider one. If you pull it out a little bit, you can have an even narrower snoot. And then if you want, soft stuff, you could put on something like this, which is, I don't know, I always call it something like a scoop. But essentially the light goes up into it. It's like a bounce, goes up into it and then goes forward. And then if you prefer something more like so, you can make the source larger. Now, this is why the conversation we had earlier is so important, because it's important to know, and I bring this up a lot, and I don't mean to call people out. But I see a lot of photographers, particularly the ones who work in certain fields, who will do something like this. They'll go out into like I always think of like photographers photographing a senator or a congressperson um, on the Capitol steps. And you'll look and they'll have their speed light aimed like this with a, like a bounce card up, as though this is going to give them better quality light than if they just did that. And from, Joe's discussion earlier, that's not true. If you didn't know it before, you certainly know it now. And the reason is because putting up the little bounce card doesn't make the source any bigger relative to the congressperson than this would. So you'll get the same quality of light. Really, all you're doing is you're shooting a whole bunch of light up into the sky and wasting it. If you're in a room, on the other hand, like I have a fairly low ceiling in here, that's different because now the light's going up into the ceiling and we're going from a little tiny source into something much, much bigger. And so in that case, it makes a huge difference. But if you're outside, you won't get any softer quality light by not aiming it right at the person. All you're doing is making the speed light work really hard, and you're getting the exact same quality because this little bounce card is the same size as the front of your speed light. So it's not any bigger. That's where something like this comes in, because now you are making it bigger. You're going from that little front to something that's like 6 to 8 times bigger. So the light quality should definitely be much better. If you don't need that much of a difference, you can go with something like this that is, I don't know, that's maybe 4 times bigger. Maybe this is 10 times bigger, but it's bigger is the key. And so it will definitely change the quality of the light. So Jake, to finish answering your question, I think this system is super cool just simply because it's so fast. It allows you to, change things really quickly. They come on and come off with ease, and it travels really well. It's the only thing I can think of to answer your question that is, unique to a single brand. Joe,
Yeah,
have we missed any?
I was just no, actually, I think that's it with the questions. It's all about controlling the light to unleash your vision, whether it's a larger source, a smaller source, a focus beam, a barn doors, grids. It's just wide open. And that's, for me, it's what makes photography right now such an amazing time to be a photographer. And Joey and I obviously, we care a lot about lighting. Cameras today are amazing. You can go buy a camera at a Target or some store and get a good exposure with auto exposure, autofocus. If you know anything about composition, get it composed. The thing the camera can't do that's very unique is light something. That has to come from the photographer, and it's just wide open, whatever you want to do. And that's why we're very passionate about lighting. And as Joey mentioned, in a couple of weeks, we're going to have another one of these sessions where the focus isn't going to be on modifiers that go on the lights. It's going to be more about modifiers that go between the light and the subject and how we handle them, because that opens up a whole nother avenue of control to define our subject. So really, we hope you guys can join us for that. And also join us for other workshops. We are about to list a handful of new workshops or upcoming workshops next week. Those should be on the site sometime next week. We always joke that we're better photographers than we are website builders. So please don't hold us against us if it takes a little bit longer. Website stuff takes us longer than we always think it's going to. So please don't hold that against us.
Yeah, if you don't know us, we'd like you to know us. Joe and I love photography, and the only thing we love more than photography itself is sharing about it. And so it's this whole thing for us is very much, the common term of the day is passion project. We love sharing about photography, and more than anything else, seeing other people get better at it. We share everything that we possibly can. There's no holding back. There's no, oh, I don't want to tell you that or anything like that. The whole idea, I always say that both of us have made so many mistakes over, jointly 60 years worth of being professional photographers, we'd like to save you the trouble. You don't have to make the mistakes we've already made, and we can share about the things that will keep you from having to make those mistakes. But if you want to just to finish with what Joe said, if you want to see your photographs elevated to a place that's different than other people's, I think there's no better way than through light, and it's very much an emphasis of what we talk about and what we'd like to share with you. So with that, Joe, I think our time is up. I just want to say thank you to everyone for joining us. We'll send out an email probably in a little bit in the next couple days talking about the next one we're going to do, and we'd love to have you back. So with that, Joe, any last words?
I just want to say thank you. There were some questions about the video. Definitely let us know if you're interested in a copy. One of the reasons we switched our platform for this is to be able to have higher quality video. And we're always trying to, well, up what we're doing. You know, as Joey was running 4 cameras, today I have 2. Sometimes it's 4. We love sharing every possible detail because I think in the extent of our careers, we both probably get more now out of seeing other people reach their potential and their goals because we've been very fortunate in our own careers.
Yeah.
And we want to pass that along. And as they say, pay it forward. So I think with that, and if you are interested in the video, please just email us. Email address is on our website and just let us know. So again, thank you to everyone for joining us.
Yeah. Thank you, everyone. We'll see you soon.